Welcome to Mob Talk. Jason Harris guides our live weekly show with numerous automotive experts talking anything and everything automotive. Turn up the volume and let's get ready to rock.
How do we create a buying process and not a sales process? And I'll go into a little bit of explanation around that. Regardless if you like Carvana or Vroom, all right, what they have done is they created a buying process. Now, it's a buying process that not every single consumer may or may not want to take, but regardless, it is a buying process, not a sales process. And I think there is a tremendous amount in value for the consumer to want to engage in a buying process, not a sales process. I would love to get your guys' thoughts on how as an industry do we shift from a sales process to a buying process. Don't you all jump in at once.
So I can jump in on this.
Go ahead, Gary.
So one of the things that our dealer group has done is we really have embraced the virtual buying experience. We did it right before COVID got kind of started, and since COVID ramped up, it's turned into something that we've made a daily part of our lives, and now it contributes to around 40% of our business. And what that looks like is somebody chooses to basically buy from home, and we create an environment where basically everything is streamlined. We have management and sales professionals who that's explicitly all that they do is a remote sales experience for that customer. And it creates such a convenient, streamlined process where within about an hour and a half, we have somebody, if they're that serious about buying it, we create a virtual showroom experience for that customer. We integrate videos, Zoom calls, FaceTime, everything to create a transparent flow of information from us to that customer. And we basically have our management set up where everything goes from salesperson to testing to F&I extremely quickly, and then all that's left is delivering the vehicle. And we offer free at-home delivery within 500 miles of our dealership. So that turns into huge returns because we're offering that. And it's blown my mind because I'm integrally a part of it. I'm one of the best managers for the virtual process in my dealership. And it has revolutionized the way that we sell cars in our dealer group.
See, I love that because, right now I think we talk a lot about digital retailing, and you notice here that I didn't use digital retailing in kind of the conversation, right? Because I'm looking for a buying process. And digital retailing might be an element of that, or being able to sell virtually online or be able to deliver it from across borders, whatever that is. But, I'm looking at more of the process, not necessarily the tools, because I think process has to come first. Tools have to come second. Anybody else have kind of any thoughts on, as an industry, how do we create a buying process versus a sales process?
I'll jump in.
Yeah, please.
So
Hey, listen.
I'm coming more from the vendor side, and I actually work with Jason, luckily enough.
See how she used the word lucky, guys? She says she's lucky. She's just being nice. She hates me.
Not a chance. I think a lot of it, especially with COVID, as Gary said, is meeting your customers where they want to be met and focusing on that customer-centric attitude, because your customers aren't going to want to buy from you repeatedly or refer other customers to you if you're not focused on that customer experience at the end of the day. And I love that, Gary, and you are giving your team the ability to take that ownership and take that leadership, because if you don't have to be a manager to be a leader, especially within the dealership or within the automotive industry. You just have to be willing to take those steps and own your process.
Agreed. That is a great point. Thank you, Felicity.
I was going to add to that too.
I'd like to.
Go ahead.
Okay. First thing is I won't take too much time, but Jason, what's a KPI? I have no idea what you guys are talking about.
Oh, I'm sorry. You know what?
Performance indicator.
In our industry, we love our 3-letter acronyms and our 4-letter words. And sometimes I still find new 3-letter acronyms and even new 4-letter words I didn't know existed. So yeah, key performance indicator is what that one stands for.
Okay. All right. So thank you. Curtis, really, I think that when he was talking, I wanted to jump in right after because I'm glad to see all of the people and everybody talking because everybody has wonderful ideas. And it's really working on this side of the fence where all of all of us marketers, all of us vendors, all of us are trying to find what we need to do to help our dealers. And the beauty of it is that we've all made the transition or we're helping each other make the transition. So now I'm seeing that it's great to be on this side because we do need to be the leaders. And it comes down to, Gary V. I've been listening to him, and he talks about accountability. And accountability starts with the individual. So if we're going to ever make any change anywhere, we need the leaders back in the places, teaching the leadership that goes from the top down. And when you see, and then I listen to Sandy Ceramic, and Sandy talks about culture. And when you walk into a dealer, that the dealer is engaged and he or she is passionate about the store is a wonderful example of how business should be. And that's what I believe we're all working on, but trying to get to the decision makers in the dealerships to embrace the change. And, we have been battling for years. We have been trying to help for years. And now it's time to start building bridges, and everybody in these rooms are doing wonderful things. Mm-hmm. And so I'll just jump really quick and end, is that the latest now is the old marketing that McDonald's used to use, and it was have it your way. So that reminds me is we do need to get back to the 80s. We need to go all the way back to the 80s.
You know what, Gary? I'm with you on that. There were some great slogans back there. I mean, you know what? I not a lot of people know this, but one of my very first jobs was Radio Shack. So I'm dating myself. Okay. Okay. And it was like, you got questions, we got answers. And it was a commitment to the buyer. That's the kicker. It was a commitment to the buyer. You could walk into a Radio Shack if you had a question about a diode, a resistor, a transistor, a radio, a computer, or a TV. All right, I had the freaking question for it, or the answer for it. Sorry. Anyways, but no, Gary, I'm with you on that one. I definitely think there were some great ones in the 80s that were more about the buyer and less about the sales process.
And how many times do you end up going to McDonald's and the person working behind the counter is pushing you to buy a burger? Almost never. Well, you know what? And it's because they're listening and they're waiting for the buyer to order because they like it their way.
Right? And McDonald's is a good example of going to a buying process versus sales process. Those kiosks in McDonald's have increased their average dollar per ticket by 23%. Right. And it was a buying process. It's a process. You have to go through it to purchase it. Right. And it wasn't with the intent of selling it. They actually sell more fries. You don't remember when McDonald's had that? Would you like fries with that? All right. And that was their thing. Would you like fries with that? Now, all right, the machines are just it creates the buying process and doesn't have to be sold. I like this, guys. This is great.
What's also interesting is you start doing some generation, and my generation is still ordering McDonald's, but the younger generation is ordering what plan they want. They want a number 5. They want a number 2. I don't know what a number 5 is and a number 2. What comes in that? It's like so you come with your kids. They're saying, I want a 2. I want a hamburger and give me a Big Mac and some soda. So it's interesting how they own us.
Thanks, Gary. Hey, Paul, I know you had some thoughts on this and you were about to jump in there. Would you like to add to this?
Sure. Yeah, it's a fascinating conversation. And I think from my perspective, one of the things that we need to pay the most attention to, both from a KPI's perspective, but also in buying process is we really need to think deliberately about the people that we're putting in front of our customers.
Good
and
point.
To expand on that, I think, frankly, I think the model's changing. I think the type of people that are going to succeed in the business moving forward won't be the same type of people as we've seen in the past. And I don't mean that there's going to be a wholesale change, but what I mean is if we're really going to put ourselves out there as the customer-centric store or the best price store or the family values store, whatever it is that the brand is being built around the dealership, that has to come to life through the people. Just the same way that when McDonald's makes a brand promise out in the marketplace, it has to come to life when you show up at the counter. And one of the things that I see is, and I love that Terry keeps bringing up sports themes because they're very, very relevant. But the thing that sticks with me here is that when somebody scores a touchdown, the entire team wins. When somebody sells a car, that doesn't necessarily mean that the whole team wins. And dealerships that are getting better at creating a culture of inclusiveness and a common purpose and rallying around, let's do this together, let's create amazing customer experiences, let's put the customer at the center of everything we do in both our processes and the tools that we use and the way that we show up, are likely to be more successful because people are spending so much time online now. They really do have a perception of the store and a perception of the brand, and in a perfect world, a perception of the salesperson they're about to meet before they ever step foot in the store, before they ever send an email, or before they ever pick up a phone. And then finally, the last thing I would say on this is that if our people can't create the same engagement with customers, whether they're in person, on the phone, on a video, on an email, on a text, then they're screwed because people are going to use all those mediums depending on the type of communication they want to have. And one thing that we need to spend a lot of time and energy on is making sure that our people are great at that. And let me ask you, last time one of your sales managers sat down and reviewed a text conversation between one of your sales consultants or a customer, or read over one of the emails, or watched one of the videos and provided feedback, the time that we do that is when we see somebody doing something in the showroom. We need to spend more time making sure that our people are experts at delivering our brand promise on every medium.
You know what? I like the fact, Paul, that you bring up the showroom because I think there's so much importance when we're talking about a buying process, right, versus a sales process, right? We don't have 12 steps, okay? We're not forced to execute a 12-step anything in a buying process. A buying process kind of has the ability to kind of ebb and flow and transition and move around to where it needs to be so that the customer feels comfortable moving forward. And
absolutely,
just how does that, like, I mean, you got to understand, I mean, for the last, 40 years, we've been running with a 12-point sales process, or 11 or 7 or whatever the hell your dealership has, right? All right. It's very defined. I mean, I don't know about you guys in the room, and Duran, I know you're in here, and Bill, you guys, like you guys have sold cars before. I mean, I remember when I first started, all right, I wasn't allowed to get numbers or payments from a manager unless I got on a test drive. If the customer hadn't taken a test drive, I wasn't allowed to go any farther in that sales process. And that's where I'm kind of getting at, where we need to get away from. Do you guys remember that?
I totally remember that. I had to have a Foursquare written up before I could get numbers.
That's right. Get that worksheet done before you can even talk to a manager.
Absolutely.
If we were really rotten, we wanted a $500 deposit.
Yeah, exactly. I actually do remember that. I had to bring a credit card along with the offer. Like I actually remember I had to bring a credit card along with the customer's offer. Otherwise, the manager was not even going to look at the paper. It didn't matter what the hell was written on that paper if I didn't have a credit card in hand. And guys, I hate to say it, but there are still some dealerships that operate like this. I mean, I'm not talking in the past tense here. I visit thousands, or I mean, not visit as much as I used to, right? But I have visited thousands of dealerships over the years, and there are still many dealerships that operate this way.
So is the problem salespeople, or the managers, or the dealer principal?
Well, I think someone mentioned it earlier. I think Curtis mentioned it earlier. It's a leadership thing. It comes from the top down.
It's the owner of the team and the head coach of the team. You got to follow their direction. You're still players everywhere else. I mean, you have some autonomy in there, but it still starts at the top.
100%. 100%.
I used I used to have this great conversation with dealers when we were sitting down talking about their teams, and I'd say, how committed are you to the long-term success of your organization? And every dealer would say 5 out of 5. And I'd say, okay, let's think about your sales managers. How would they rank on a scale of 5? Are they committed to you as you to the long-term success of the dealership? And they'd say, well, they're very committed, but probably not as much as me. They don't have the investment, so I'm going to give them a 4 out of 5. And then I said, what about your salespeople? On a scale of 1 to 5, how committed are they to the long-term success of your dealership? And they'd stop and they'd think about it. And it was hard for them to come up with a 4. It was hard for them to come up with a 3 sometimes, and they'd usually say 2. And the follow-up question is, so that I understand, the people that have the largest influence on the impact your customers experience in your store are the least committed to the long-term success of your organization. Do I have that right?
So I would like to follow up with, the most interesting KPI and conversation needs to be had is, don't ask the GM, don't ask the dealer principal, ask the salespeople, ask the service advisors, ask the service manager. On the scale of 1 to 5, how do you rank blah, blah, blah? Like, ask those guys. Those are the guys in the trenches. The principal is going to tell you whatever the hell you want to hear.
Totally agree. And that's the answer that's most likely to have an influence on the success of the store. And that's a leadership job, is making sure that answer is consistent across the board and everybody's engaged.
100%. Hey, we have a couple other people. I want to see make sure I get everyone get a chance to kind of chat. I don't know, Bill, if you're able to talk, or Duran, if you're able to jump in. I know you guys spend a lot of times in the trenches, with the team, working with exactly what we're talking about here. So I'd love to hear from yourself, Bill, or Duran, if you're able to talk. I'd love to hear you guys' thoughts.
Hey, Jason, this is Bill. Thanks so much for having me tonight. I'm getting a feel for what the whole group's all about, the conversation. So it's wonderful. I agree with a lot of points. I disagree with some points. I believe there's a little bit of semantics being batted around.
Hey, man, that's what this room's for. That's the best thing about Clubhouse, is that we're not here necessarily just to pat each other on the back. We're here to actually have real conversations and challenge each other back and forth. So let's do it. Let's challenge each other.
I don't see a difference between the sales process and the buying process. I believe that we're not evolving fast enough. And as someone commented earlier, how the 40% of their business is now coming from online, I think that's absolutely magnificent. That is and I'm sorry I forgot the individual's name. That was Gary. Thank you, Gary. That's wonderful, magnificent. I wrote a whole program on, and call it now, selling virtually, and having wonderful success selling it to dealers. And it's rather simple. It's not, in my opinion, radically changed, other than the fact that technology is factored into it so much. So whether an individual gravitates to Zoom or FaceTime or Snapchat or any kind of platform that can create a presentation instantly on the phone, I'm writing the piece for email. It's going to be completely different, but the bottom line is just as I think it was Sandy was mentioning, the customer focused approach, which has been my dialogue for eons, going all the way back to a lot of training I did with Chrysler, versus the dealer centric approach, which I think is what we're all talking about right here. Yep. One of the challenges as suppliers that I think we're always going to run into is that the dealer principal writes a check. So whatever they like to hear that we're going to deliver in terms of suppliers, probably going to be the sold item that we're delivering. And everyone is absolutely correct. The person to speak to is the salesperson. But the sad part of the whole equation, it just in my opinion, and I don't know if anyone wants to chime in afterwards, is that the salesperson really doesn't have the autonomy to change either the buying process or the sales process. They're going to follow the direction from the manager who receives it from the top. And when we now factor in dealer group participation, the challenge then becomes the dealer principal is absent and the dealership runs any which way they can in order to hit their targets and objectives. And I think that's what destroys the customer focused approach. Yep. That at the end of the day, they have to meet their numbers, because whoever's sitting in the ivory tower, that's how they're judging success of how their operation is running.
I like it.
Right, and I think that makes a lot of sense. I mean, when they're not meeting their sales goals, then they can feel a lot of this pressure sitting on their shoulders that they need to perform, more today than they did yesterday. And often that pressure can make it turn into a sales process rather than the buying process. So as opposed to talking to a customer where they're pushing their own product or their own ideals, trying to get that sale. Sometimes it happens, they get the sale, but you know what? At the end of the day, that customer, either they can decide to feel happy about their experience, or they can think that maybe they were pressured and they were pushed, and that's usually the stigma that's associated with dealers is that they're just pushing too hard, they're too needy for those sales, and if we can shift that thought over to that buying process, then now we want to educate our customers. We want to be those people to help them to be those go-to salespeople for our customers. Then they will actually want to recommend us to someone else that, this guy actually steered me in the right direction, not the direction that, was the more expensive option or the one that was the prettiest or the best incentive deal. No, this salesperson actually told me, why don't you do a little bit more research and get back to me? And I feel like that's something I appreciate so much from when I go ahead and start buying something. When someone actually steers me in a direction that's not, that doesn't look like it's in their best interest, but the customer's.
That's a great point. And I think right now, because of what's happened in the last 12 months, all right, as an industry, we have done a better job on the sales side, all right, to start creating more buying processes rather than sales processes. Where I'm still seeing a lot of things haven't changed is really kind of in the F&I office. And I'd love to get you guys' thoughts on this, is that there are very specific products or warranties, all right, that are more of a sell rather than a buying process, meaning that the dealerships know what they make money on. And they're selling rather than helping the dealership or helping the customer buy. And I think there's a big difference between selling something and assisting the customer to buy. What are your guys' thoughts?
Jason, I'll jump on this one. And it really, I'll try to be concise. Subprime and prime. Prime, they really just need to stick to a thorough menu presentation, and that's what most experts agree, and that's how to do it. Mm-hmm. But unfortunately, on subprime, this is where it's stuffing, that the dealers are getting the deals hung, and then the lenders are allowing a service contract in gap. So there's no discussion when it comes to this is how the deal is. So the subprime people are being treated kind of a little, rough, and then they're not
being
given
put through
much
a process.
option. And so the dealers look at subprime as it's not that much of a business, but that's where all the fraud, that's where all the problems, and that's where all the compliance pieces, and they need to start paying attention to that because the process needs to be identical regardless. It needs to have the same process, whether credit, privacy, red flags, and that's where we as, trainers is trying to coach these guys and gals once and for all, is that the tools and the services are there. They just need to start connecting the pieces and practice what needs to be done. And so this is excellent because this is what we need. We brought digital, but now no one knows the laws that come to each state when it comes to banking and financing. And now this is where the CFPB is spending all of their energies. And this is where we need to educate the dealers to beware because the laws are now on the books. They're identified, and it's up to the state's Department of Justice, DOJ, the FTC watches everybody federally, but the states are required to prosecute.
That's a very good
This is
point.
our
That's a
office.
very good point, Gary. And regulation on, in addition to the topic that we're talking about, could be a whole nother section in itself.
It is. It is.
Hey guys, I want
So,
to keep the flow going here. Hey, I see Jeff. Jeff joined. John, hey, thanks for coming up. Jesse, I see you're down there as well. Harry, what's going on? Hey guys, we're talking right now about how we create or the difference between a buying process and a sales process. I am kind of I'm in the mindset right now that as an industry, we need to create a process that allows the customer to buy something versus a process that requires us to sell something. Not everybody agrees with me. Bill doesn't, so that's cool. But I'd love to get everybody's thoughts on this. Jeff, John, Jesse, Harry, anybody else like to jump in?
Yeah, this is Harry. I'd like to jump in. In listening to the conversation, I really understand now a lot of my, frustrations as a consumer, because I buy a new car every year. And what I do is the last 5 cars I bought, I've gone to Car Gurus, to the new car section, looked at what car I wanted, the discounts that were available. And then, I've always kind of seen dealerships, and this, may not be good for this conversation, but I've always seen dealerships as a commodity.
Mm-hmm.
I focus on the car, and I go to that dealership, and I'm ready to buy. But the problem is when I get to that dealership, then the salesperson wants to run me through a whole sales process, and it's very frustrating because I've already made a decision on the car I want. I see the discounts available on Car Gurus, and I really just want to focus on fine tuning those discounts instead of going through a whole sales process. I'm actually ready to purchase at that point. So this conversation has really helped me understand why, I have so much frustration. Once I get to a dealership, the person wants to invoke the sales process when I'm actually ready to buy.
And
Look,
they don't pay
I'm with you.
attention.
100%. Duran, is there something? I saw you flashing there. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was going to add something into that. And Harry, that was great that he shared that, because how I would pivot this, Jason, with your question, you're saying it's a buying process or a sales process. And the way that I coin that is you got to give the customers the option to do business the way that they want to do it. That's how I when I'm consulting with dealers, there's really just not a one size fits all, because you just heard Harry's story.
Yeah.
And so what happened is when that salesperson engaged with Harry, they didn't give him the option to buy the way that he wanted to buy. So there's different word tracks and ways that you have to ask certain questions about where the customer is on their process, asking them like, what websites did you use while you were shopping, sir? Okay, so did you find all the information that you needed online in terms of payment and things of that nature? And so we kind of have to talk that way to customers, because that's what they're seeing on the website anyways. But we're so caught up on this old language that we've been taught that so another example of giving somebody the option, I teach the people that, when a request comes in online and a customer came in from a third party source, maybe on day 1 or day 2, educating them and just say, hey, if you're looking to save time with your next purchase, here's a way that you can kind of be part of the process. And people are like, whoa, like I've run click-through rates on those messages, and they have a 75 to 79% click-through rate when you incorporate messages that talk about empowering customers to be part of the process or allow them to purchase. So it's not that there's one way that's completely right and there's one that's completely wrong. It's just trying to figure out what the customer wants, but making sure that on the dealer side, they're at least catering and giving the option to allow people to, if they want to be in control of the process or be part of the process, or do they want a salesperson that can lead them the whole way? Because some people, and somebody talked about subprime, and it's not a dig on them, but it's like subprime does need to be catered a little bit more about how the process needs to work to best serve them versus somebody that can write a check, or it's the prime buyer. They're the ones that are more focused on time and convenience and getting done pretty quick. So it's like you really have to alter it. But I love this discussion. I love the question that you posed, Jason. So thank you.
Thanks, Duran.
Hey, can I just real quick? Can I just ditto Duran's statement, man, and just call it mine, because
sure,
that was awesome. That was
there should be a ditto button here.
There should be a ditto button.
Yeah, we should put a ditto button. and he's right. And we put a consumer in here. Harry is a consumer, and he said, "This is what I want to buy." If he's on step 4, the 7-step buying process, why, when we walk into the dealership, are we putting him back at step 2 of the process?
Exactly.
That's only going to frustrate him. So awesome, Duran. Nice pull.
Yep. Well said.
Yeah, I even had a situation one time where I was driving a Challenger SRT, and I went to Car Gurus a couple years later, and there was another Challenger SRT that I really liked, and I decided I wanted to trade mine for that one. And when I went to the dealership, the salesperson asked me if I wanted to do a test drive. Now, I mean, I already own the Challenger SRT. Why would I want to test drive the one I want to buy? So yeah, this has been very eye-opening for me.
Thanks, Harry.
And Harry, I
jump in
tell
there.
you, yeah, and your story is all too familiar, and we don't teach enough that you have to pick up where the customer's at.
Mm-hmm.
I got into I was on a show quite a few, 3 or 4 years ago. They were talking about is the road to the sale dead, and it's really not. There's just a lot more on ramps and off ramps now for the consumer. They have a lot more choices and they're in more control.
Mm-hmm.
I made the analogy about, if I'm going to hitchhike, I live in Tulsa. If I'm going to hitchhike to Oklahoma City, hour and a half, and I walk halfway and I'm thumbing a ride, and somebody pulls up and I say, yeah, I'm headed to Oklahoma City. They say, well, hop in. I say, yeah, but if you don't mind, can we go back to Tulsa and then go to Oklahoma City? Because that's kind of the way I'm used to doing it. And, they would look at you like, what are you, insane? I just came from there. Hop in, I'll take you the rest of the way. So if you think about how ridiculous that is, it's really the same. They've already come part of the way. You just need to get in where they're at, find out, like we were talking about just a second ago, find out where they're at, ask questions, find out the way they want to do it, and then hop in and join them and say, my job is to hop in here and help you finish this as quickly and efficiently as possible. So
that's right. Assist them in the purchase to buy. I love it.
Say that again.
I said that's empowering the customer to actually have the choice to purchase their way.
Yeah, it's just listening.
Mm-hmm.
And if you'll listen, they'll tell you through questioning. They'll give you the roadmap to help them finish, and it's way easier than you're making it. It's a lot easier to hop in with them and finish the ride rather than start over. It's frustrating, but that's kind of the analogy I use.
Right, and sometimes customers will actually call in and they'll ask directly, you know what, I don't want anything else, just tell me the price of this vehicle. And either you can say, no sir, my dealership doesn't really let me do that, why don't you come in for a test drive? Whereas that person just wants that price, he wants that number. So you can give them that number and then work with that customer where they are. And you can jump right to the end of the sale with some people, because those people know what they want that. And, the sooner that we give them what they're asking for, the more they'll respect us. And they'll actually think, you know what, this is someone I can actually work with. This person can actually help me get there, not just slow me down.
Agreed. Hey guys, I'm gonna throw one additional question around this topic, and then I'm gonna switch it up to our other topic. But does anybody feel like the reason that we a lot of dealerships maintain a very stringent sales process is because there's just no coaching or development? It's more of like everyone has to paint by numbers, otherwise nothing will happen. So it's like we can get to the point where we train, but then we don't get to the point where we're actually able to coach the person to actually get to a place where they can, ebb and flow the process appropriately to the customer.
Absolutely, Jason, 100%. You nailed it right on the head. I don't even believe they do enough training, but there's definitely no support, no coaching, and no continued reinforcement. That may be even a better term than the coaching. And consequently, the process becomes the crutch. And as long as they touch on 8, 10, 12, whatever your steps are, then management thinks that they're delivering. And the sad part is if the poor buyer is just exhausted with the whole process of shopping and they just buy, the dealership, the salesperson or the manager may take credit for the fact that they followed the process.
Yeah. Look, Bill, I
Right, and
remember.
that's what I was going to say there.
Go ahead.
That's what I was going to say there, Jason.
Please,
Is
John.
I feel like this is something that's not just automotive specific, but just generally when salespeople are trained. And I know in automotive we talk a lot about the training, but if we're talking about the process, we think that's the recipe for success, right?
Mm-hmm.
You follow these steps, then you're going to get to where you need to be. And there's no way that you're going to leave the customer out of the process. There's no way that you're going to leave anything on the table in the process. And just like the gentleman said a few minutes ago, just following those steps isn't going to necessarily equate to results. You can have some, like he said, I want to come in, I want to buy the Dodge Challenger. Well, unless that person is unless you're really training the person on really what that role is for them, maybe it's not the steps they need to follow, but maybe it's the servanthood that they need to be a part of what are you there for? What's your purpose in this? So I can pick up where you're ready to pick up and run with it. Because if you come and say, hey, I want to buy the Dodge Challenger SRT, and I'm going to trade in my Dodge Challenger, and I'm like, perfect, okay, excellent. What car would you like? Because in my head, I'm like, okay, first thing I'm supposed to ask is, what car would you like? And it's like, I just told you. How many times do you find yourself coming across that where you're like, I just told you that, no, I don't want the two-door Charger. I want the four-door Charger. I just told you I have kids that I need to get out of the car. Like, I just told you this. Aren't you listening to me? Like those things. So it's a lot more past the steps, and it goes more, I feel like, into the, the fluidness of listening and understanding rather than just following step by step of what they're trained.
But to your question, Jason, that we don't coach scenarios enough. Mm-hmm. So we coach these steps, and so it's 1 through 10, 1 through 10, 1 through 10. But you have to learn how to take over at step 3 or 5 or 7, and wherever that on ramp is, because we're coaching scenarios. Because in the old days, people drove around the lots, they walked on, and you learned how to up them and go through all steps. But there's multiple ways that they can enter into this sale, whether it's online or halfway through digital retailing or whatever. So you have to coach scenarios, and you have to say, okay, here's the scenario, take over, and then you role play. But it's just not standardized. We don't live in a standardized world anymore. We have to be prepared for different scenarios.
I think the customer experience is only as good as the operational ability and the leadership principles established as a culture. And it's insane. The salesman has only so much power. Yep. The salesman's doing what he thinks he's doing. The salesman's been here for 10 years, and I've done all my training, and I've signed off all my books, and I'm certified, and blah, blah, blah. The customer experience is only as good as the GSM or the principal in the building. And it's not necessarily the salesman's fault all the time, because he's only as good as the guy telling him he's good.
Exactly. 100%.
Thanks for tuning in to Mob Talk. Feel free to like, follow, comment, or get a hold of me with any ideas for new content on future shows. Be sure to check out more amazing automotive content from our Strategy Mob captains and crew at strategymob.com.